Okay, so is IQ real? Depends what you mean by real. IQ is averaged performance across averaged sets of questions that require abstraction to conceive of and answer. Is it real? Well, it's real statistically, and you can use it to predict important outcomes that other things can't predict. And from a scientific perspective, and it's also correlated with various physiological and biological phenomena. Well, that's how you define real scientifically. So yes, it's real. Are there other factors that determine people's success and worth? IQ isn't a measure of people's worth in any intrinsic sense. It's an estimate of their ability to succeed in hierarchies that are dependent on the ability to manipulate complex sets of information. There's lots of other things about people that differentiate them in terms of quality and quantity and all of those things. And the most evident of those are the big 5 traits. Now, if you're a psychologist, and this is another thing every psychologist should be taught, if you want to discover something about human beings that hasn't already been discovered, the first thing you should do is make sure it isn't IQ and it isn't any of the big 5 traits. And psychologists almost never do that, because what happens is that if they control for IQ, so in a regression you'd say, okay, here's the thing I'm interested in predicting. The first thing we're going to do is add IQ. And not a measure that you took in 5 minutes either, like a real IQ test, because you want to use a good measure to test your hypothesis against. And not a 10-item measure of the big 5 either, like a 100-item measure, so you get a reliable measure. You throw in IQ, you throw in the big 5, and then you throw in your dopey construct. And then you see if it can predict anything. And the answer is no. And so psychologists don't do it, because whenever they do it properly, it destroys their construct. And that makes them irritated, because their claim to their position of authority in the educational dominance hierarchy is predicated on the validity of their construct. Now, if you're a real scientist, what you try to do is destroy your construct. You think, okay, it looks like this is real. Then you think, it's probably not. And I don't want to spend the next 10 years chasing a ghost and a chimera. So I'm going to try to destroy the damn thing. So you say, well, we'll match it up against a good measure of IQ and a comprehensive big 5. And it still survives. We'll do a couple of replications to make sure that we can't kill it any other way. And maybe we'll do the statistics 3 or 4 different ways to make sure that the thing just doesn't disappear when you use a different statistical procedure. And people don't do that, and that's why the replication rate, even among well-established psychological findings, so to speak, ones that have been highly cited, is extraordinarily low. And if you talk to psychologists, they'll wave their hands and they'll say, well, I don't really believe in IQ. It's like, okay, you know, we're not talking about, what do you call those? What did the Ghostbusters hunt down? We're not talking about paranormal phenomena. They're not things you get to believe in or not, right? There are rules for defining what constitutes something that's real from a scientific perspective and a psychometric perspective. So you don't get to say, well, I'll apply one definition of reality because I don't like IQ, and then I'll use the same definition to justify my own constructs. Like, sorry, that isn't how it works. You can do that if you're a postmodernist, you can do that. But if you're a person who actually thinks scientifically, you don't get to play that game. So, now, you know, part of the reason that we need to know about these sorts of things, let's see, how are we doing for time here? Oh yeah, we're doing good. I think we need to know these things partly because they have policy implications. First of all, you need to know them for your own life, because you got to know that there are differences in intelligence. It's really important. If you go into a job and you're not smart enough for that job, you're going to have one bloody miserable time. And you're going to make life wretched for the people around you because you won't be able to handle the position. And as you climb hierarchies of competence, the demand on fluid intelligence increases. And so, unless you want to fail, you don't put yourself in over your head. Well, what's over your head? Well, that's a tricky thing to figure out. I mean, you have to figure that out with intelligence, you have to figure it out with conscientiousness, you have to figure it out with creativity, you have to figure it out with stress tolerance, with agreeableness, because you want to go into a cooperative environment and not a competitive one if you're agreeable, and with neuroticism, you probably want to keep the stress level of your job relatively low, because those are all places that you can break down. And most people have at least one significant weakness in their intelligence personality makeup, and you got to be careful not to place yourself in a position where that's going to be a fatal flaw. But what you really want to do as far as I can tell, if you want to maximize your chances for both success and let's say well-being, is you want to find a strata of occupation in which you would have an intelligence that would put you in the upper quartile. That's perfect. Then you're a big fish in a small pond.